speaking on Make Me an Instrument of Peace, Dying to Self. Okay. Welcome, welcome. She's actually a pirate this morning. I should have said pirate. Reverend Pirate Patricia. Oh, you come down, I'll go up. Oh, there's another one back there. I think I might need to take him off because he might have something else to share. I don't know. He might have a mind of his own, hey. Yeah, he's gonna hang out here for a while. Yeah, I don't know, that doesn't look very good. How's that? This way I can hear him if he has anything to say. Yikes. So much fun to just have a little fun, isn't it good? It's good to kind of shake it up a little bit. So glad to be with you today. And, you know, I love how the divine works for us because I decided to do the prayer of St. Francis 2 months ago. And I was breaking it down by each section. And, of course, the last one is dying to self. The last one is about dying to self. And so it worked out perfectly for kind of a Halloween theme, a spooky theme, an All Souls theme. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And I've been looking at a couple of different kind of ways of talking about this. One of the things I really wanted to do was to pull in the work of Eknath Easwaran, who was the one I spoke about in the very beginning. He was the founder of Blue Mountain Meditation Center in Petaluma, and he was a teacher in Berkeley, coming out of a Hindu background, but with a very Christian. He's very much Christian in his understanding of Jesus and the teachings of Jesus, and of course of St. Francis. So I wanted to share a little bit from his understanding of the prayer of St. Francis. And I think before I do that, I'd like to just have us all listen, or if you choose to and you know the prayer, that we would speak it so you understand kind of the movement of this prayer, which is what we've been focusing on for the past 4 Sundays, basically. So it's, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me so love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I might not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. And we're not specifically talking about dying in the physical body, although I'm going to bring in some of Charles Fillmore's awareness of the physical body and the death in the physical body, because curiously enough, I found a chapter in a book that fell off the shelf for me, and it's called The Eternal Life from Charles Fillmore. So I thought, well, that might be something useful for us to look at. But I want to share first what Eknath Easwaran says about this prayer, because I think it's really important for us to understand what St. Francis is doing here and how this impacts us in our life. He says, as long as we are full of ourselves, our own small desires and self-centered thoughts, we leave no room whatsoever for the Lord to work our lives. Jesus simply says, thy will be done. The implication is clear. To live in harmony with the divine will, our petty, selfish, personal will, our self-will has to go. When we ask to be made instruments of peace, what we're really asking for is the boundless determination to empty ourselves of every ugly state of mind that disrupts relationships, of anger, of resentment, of jealousy, of greed, self-will in any form. This is really what the prayer of St. Francis is about. It's about moving outside of ourselves and that limitation that we find because we think we're somehow separate. We think there's a me and a not me. They think there's a Patricia and there's a Philip. But when we understand what we talk about in unity, this one presence and one power, that's the omnipotence and presence of the divine, we come to begin to grok in our heads from an intellectual perspective that we truly are one being. We're one being with all life. There is really no me and no Philip. We can create what we might think of as a personality, and even our friend Emily Cady, who wrote Lessons in Truth, talked about this idea that we have an individuality, which is our spiritual nature, and we have a personality that puts on things and roles that we play, ideas that we carry. And so this idea that St. Francis is inviting us into is about becoming more and more aware of that small self, that me self, that not so much self-centered, but just this self-obsessed self that most of us carry around and live in all of our lives. In fact, it's what we see in the world, isn't it? We see it very much magnified right now in the time that we're living in. I have some teachers from India that wrote a book. Krishnji and Preetaji wrote a book in, I think it was about 2020, it became a bestseller. It's called The Four Sacred Secrets. And it's a book I've taught many, many times online as a book study. And one of the things that they're very, very clear about, and this is deeply a part of the Hindu tradition, that we are not this small self. The small self that we think we are is not who we are. We're much bigger and expanded than the small self. And part of this book, which has been such a gift for me in my own life and also in helping other people begin to understand this kind of, it's like a self-obsession that we have, and we think it's who we are. So I'd like to share just a little bit from the Four Sacred Secrets about this idea, because I want us to really begin to kind of understand it more deeply for ourselves. They say we're not talking about selfishness, which is acting without regard for others. That's not what St. Francis is talking about either. What we mean by self-obsession is an internal preoccupation with self. We wage imaginary wars in our mind, measuring ourselves against others, and obsessing about what they think about us. When self-obsession takes over, the actual issues of life will remain unaddressed. We develop a perpetually insecure mind that easily perceives insult or disrespect even when there is none. We grow discontented with who we are. We become obsessed with an image of who we should be. In a desperate attempt as psychological survival, we try to conform to other standards and win attention. We become people who wear many masks. Thought that was appropriate today as we're playing and wearing many masks. But this is something for us to become more aware of in our life. I was looking at Fillmore and trying to kind of contain some of this because it's so much a part of all the teachings that we have. It's the teachings that Jesus gives us in the Bible. When we understand those teachings as the journey of our own soul, as the journey of the collective soul, as a journey of humankind, to awaken into what we call as Christ consciousness. We're talking Christ consciousness is about living in that higher realm of understanding that we are that universal energy. Not just that we're a part of it, we are that energy. It's how we're made. And it's very interesting in this book that I found with Charles, where he talks about this. this is an interesting book. I want to call people's attention to this because it's not a book that I normally share from, and it was just kind of fell off my shelf like those books do. It's called The Essential Charles Fillmore, and it's edited by one of the really great teachers, one of the metaphysicians at Unity Village. His name is Jim Gaither. And what he's done is he's taken Fillmore's writing and brought to us the more understandable of Fillmore's writing. If some of you have read Charles Fillmore, I know there's some of you have. It can tend to be a little bit difficult to dig into, but this book has some real insight into the way Fillmore understands the nature of God and the nature of who we are on this spiritual journey. So I really recommend it to anybody who wants to know more about the Unity teachings and beginning to understand this. So this chapter called Attaining Eternal Life, I'm like, oh really? Eternal life is what we're talking about here, dying to attain eternal life. In this chapter, Fillmore lays out his understanding of how we basically incarnate. He believed in reincarnation. He believed that we came here and in this body to move into higher states of consciousness, to basically become the Christ consciousness, this higher consciousness, this fully embodied energy of spirituality, the fullness of the divine. But that it's important that we carry this in a physical body. He's not necessarily celebrating the fact that, yes, there are souls out there who have this higher consciousness. He talks about the idea that he calls it re-embodiment, which we can translate as reincarnation, to come back and carnate, to come in the meat body. That we do this, we get another opportunity to actually raise our consciousness to a higher level. And it's kind of the same thing that my teachers in India talk about when they talk about reincarnation. We're coming back. We learn things in a certain lifetime, then we come back because we've got more things to learn. There are more things for us to do in the world as a spiritual being, not necessarily in pirate body or in Patricia body or in mom body or in minister body, but as a spiritual being. And Fillmore talks in a way I have never heard of about this the transcendence of how this occurs. He says that we are all spirit, and that as spirit, we are the I am being of the divine. We are that being, the I am. And what do we do with an affirmation? Janu, what's an affirmation? How do we start it? We say, I am, right? That's that spirit nature of who we are. He says the next thing that happens from that spirit nature is the soul opens up. And the soul then moves into activating the intellect and our senses. And it's from that activation of our intellect and our senses. So already we're into mind, aren't we? We're into the mind through the intellect and the senses. It's through the intellect and the senses that we actually incarnate into a body. So it's a movement out of this vast energy of soul into a place of moving of spirit into soul, into mind and senses, and then into the body. And he says, so when the body dies, different things happen. Different things happen. In some cases, what happens, the body dies, so realize you're going backwards then, back up into spirit. He says, in some cases, what happens, the being gets stuck at the level of the senses. And that's when people who are psychics can kind of feel the shade of somebody moving around. They can sense that someone's there. Other people can move farther up into the realm of soul. And he said what happens there is the souls basically fall asleep. The soul part of us falls asleep. And when we get reawakened, because we're always spirit, we've never left that place. The spirit is who we are. When we get reawakened, then we can come back through that element of the intellect and the body and the senses, and reincarnate in a body. So it's kind of this movement continually allowing us to not only believe and know, but to fully embody the spiritual nature of who we are. It's kind of an interesting progression, and I'd never heard it before, so I was kind of fascinated by what Charles was talking about. I had an opportunity a week and a half ago to be the minister for a memorial service for someone, and it was someone I did not know. I did not know the wife, and her husband died, but she'd been part of this community. And it was one of those experiences where there were lots of family members, lots of grandchildren. This man he'd had a motorcycle shop, so a lot of his motorcycle friends came, they had their leather jackets, and people talked about him. And as I was standing there as the minister, you were there. Yeah, Guy was there, and so was Sue. So as I was standing there, I realized I never knew the body of this man. This was not somebody I would ever say that I had known him. But because of all the ways that he had impacted the lives of other people through the being that he is, because the being wasn't gone. And people talked about him, they talked about his love, they talked about his compassion. All the grandkids were vying for who was the one he loved the most. And his friends from the motorcycle shop they had so much heart, they were in tears that he was not around anymore because he'd created such a community. And it made me realize how we are that. We are these incredible divine spiritual beings. And the more we can carry these higher qualities, the higher qualities of love, of gratitude, of joy, of patience, the quality of being willing to give love, not being the self who's obsessed and say, oh, these are my needs, you have to meet my needs, you have to love me in this way, you have to understand me. Oh, you don't understand me. We have this opportunity to expand in consciousness beyond that small self, that small me, that feels like it's alone, needs to defend itself. So I thought, this is kind of a far cry. Okay, you ready for this one? So spirit is often seen as breath, right? We think of spiritus as like the breath of God, the breath of spirit. So if people have COPD, what happens? They can't breathe, right? So C could be when we're all about comparing ourselves, when that little small self wants to compare all the time. And O can be that obsessive self, that it's all about me, 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 me. P, O could also be, I have an opinion. You need to listen to me because I have an opinion and I am right. So O could be obsessive, opinionated, comparing yourself to someone, obsessive opinion, taking a position. Do you know anybody who's positional? What does it feel like to be around somebody who's positional? Not great, right? They're just like not going to budge from what, again, it's whether we want to call it the ego. And I have the book that Leanna gave me, The Mystic Jesus, The Mind of Love, Marianne Williamson, which I'm giving you back because I read it. And no, Marianne talks, she's very much imbued in the Course in Miracles, which is all about love. Are we focusing on love or are we focusing on fear? She talks about all the time that this obsessive, self-centered energy, she identifies it as the ego. And some New Thought people call it the ego as well. This sort of small self, we could call it dying to the ego, dying to the small self, is the same one that is always in competition, that's obsessive and opinionated, that's positional, and finds itself defensive all the time. Whenever we find ourselves needing to defend ourselves, the little red flag can go on. We've become positional, we've become opinionated, we've moved into that small self. We're not open to the possibilities of what's available to us, and we're not coming from that higher spiritual self. We're coming from, the part of the soul that's incarnated as intellect or as sense consciousness. I know I'm a pirate because I'm wearing pirate clothes, right? Or I know I'm a minister because I took that class. Or I know I'm, depressed because I'm taking some drug, whatever. So it's all based on false information to the mind that's telling us who we are not. And I'm not big on calling it an illusion, but that's what people will say. So this is part of the teachings really in all spiritual traditions. When you look at India, I've read a lot of Vivekananda, and who came here to the States, Yogananda, who's come to the States and really founded spiritual traditions here, the Vedanta Society, which is down in Marin on the coast. All of these bright beings with thousands of years of history actively engaged in deep meditation, literally becoming one with all that is kind of what meditation's about, where we dissolve, that self begins to dissolve. All these beings know that the nature of who we are is nothing to do with this small self. It's all about the expanded nature of spirit, which is who and what we are, and what we're called to be more of in the world. And this is what St. Francis is calling us into in the prayer. Lord, make me an instrument of peace. And the way we do that is by dying to this small self. And the idea of the not being able to breathe, not being able to embody spirit because we have COPD, because we're constantly comparing, we're obsessing, we're opinionated, we're taking positions, and we're defending ourselves as if we were a separate being. That was just kind of a way for me to be remembering the truth of who we are, which is that we are these infinite, powerful expressions of the divine. So let's take a moment now and turn the lights out, if we would. This is a time to really celebrate the truth of who we are, to feel the grace and the blessing. So take a moment and relax in your physical body. If you're holding on to anything, just put it aside. Just allow your body to rest in the chair. And taking a deep breath of spirit, inhaling the living presence, the spiritus, into the physical body, a body that Fillmore suggests we need in order to fully live this Christ consciousness. We need to do it from a place of our physical bodies. And that body has a presence beyond its actions and its words. Its very presence is imbued with the consciousness of the divine, with the spirit highest consciousness. So taking in another deep and conscious breath into the body, relaxing more deeply. Become aware of those times in your life where you have felt the need to compare yourself to someone else, or to strongly state your opinion, perhaps in a close relationship with a partner or a friend or a child, or where you've taken a position that you can't come off of, that somehow you've become identified with, and where you feel the need to defend a self that doesn't exist, Just become aware of this. Notice if it's in a particular relationship you have, particular situation you find yourself in, where you find yourself resorting to this small self, feeling that you're somehow alone and not connected to all life. And just being in awareness of this, seeing and being aware is really the first step. Next time it comes up, you'll have more awareness and know it's not the truth of your being. Taking a moment now and invoking the presence of your God, your divine, your higher power, that spiritual life that indwells all of us, but uniquely just for you, calling upon the presence as love, calling upon the presence as connection, as grace, as faith, as love, as hope, as joy. And moving your awareness to your heart, feeling that deep presence of your divine in you as you now in this moment. And send out your love. Send it out to anyone whom you might have challenged, where there might be resentment or anger or frustration, where there might be a need to defend or compare. Just simply send out that blessing of your love and connection as an instrument of peace. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying to self that we are born to eternal life. And so it is. Ashe. And gently as you're ready, gently bring your awareness back into that body that you have right